BBL is 1 month away now. Super excited for it. We're going to be getting into our team analysis and kicking off with the Melbourne Stars. And just firstly, last year's prices, just a quick little look in as they compare to this year. And, there's a few guys on this list that we started with last year at a very different price to what we started with this year. So it's something to have a look at before we look into where we're at coming into this season in 2024. So last year we had Webster at 177. He does come in at 164.7 this year, and he had good moments last year as well. Maxwell was 118k, which is pretty wild because he's more than double that price this year. Harper's was at 130, and he's down at a ridiculously low 58,500 after having an absolute shocker. We have Stoinis at 116 last year, down into the 80s this year at 84.2. We have Tom Rogers, who was 116k, who was also down in the 80s there for him at 87.7. We have Hilton Cartwright was at 92 last year. He's up into the hundreds at 104.6 after having some good games. We have Scott Boland at 125 last year, same as Osama Mir. And they've both dropped down a little bit there, with Boland at 84.7 and Osama Mir just down 0.4k. And then we have Mark Steckity, who was 118k, who had a bit of a shocker last year. He's down at 79.1. So just interesting to see where they obviously were averaged out at the year prior to then where they are at this year. So first thing we need to do is go through a bit of a projected 11 to start the season. And this is courtesy of Maxi Bryden at SC Playbook. Could just pop that in there now. And we've got a few players in the mix also. There's 5 guys that may miss this 11. They may also play round 1 due to a few guys being out. And Ben Duckett is that first one to look at that is likely to be out of that first game if he is playing for England in their matches just to begin that big bash there. But he will be back in round 2. And you'll see there my highlighting. So I've got Duckett, Maxwell, Curran, Osama Mir, and Hamish McKenzie. They're actually guys that I am personally potentially interested in when they are given some type of opportunity as well. So with that projected 11, things may change with Scott Boland as well, given he's in the test squad for Australia. And then Osama Mir is a chance to miss that first round as well. So there's 3 guys in this 11, this likely 11, that are probably a chance of missing round 1. So we still will see a chance of a couple of these guys playing in round 1 that are contracted, and they're definitely in the mix as well. So let's kick it off with their batting order that's projected. I think that for the most part, this top 6 won't change unless there's guys that are going to be out. So Tom Rogers would likely open after opening last year, but do they decide to change anything? The only worry there is that the batters that they have in the mix are Sam Harper, who was very bad last year, and Rogers was better, even though he's only at 87k. And you've got Campbell Kellaway, who's a nice young up-and-comer, but he's a middle-order bat, so he's likely to come in if we do miss out one of these number 3 to number 6 guys. I think he'll be able to come in and play a part. And we'll see how things go with if Duckett was to be out in round 1. I think there's a good chance Harper comes in and opens, or they bring like a Stoinis up or something like that into the opening slot and change things up from there. With Stars having a very, very important beginning to the fixture list, they have a double in round 1 and round 3. They are a very important team, obviously, but what you don't want to do is select guys that are just going to be okay. They're very low chance of coming out and doing well, because cricket, it's a very fickle game where you can come out and do really well, or you can come out and get a duck very, very quickly. And then there's a bunch of these guys that just don't come out and set the world on fire in any of their games. They're not a likely player to come out and get a 60 or 70 off 40 balls. They're more of a chance of getting a quick 20 and getting out, 21 or 15, that type of realm. And then having their low games as well. And that's what Rogers is offering at the moment. So there's some luck that you can get from guys like Rogers. He can come out and make 20 or 30k and have a couple of good innings, but then he could also plod like he did last year. Ben Duckett, on the other hand, is someone that can come out and absolutely dominate each and every game, but he can dominate in each and every game, depending on which one is going to be his day. Is what you should be seeing with Duckett on a week-to-week basis. But with him most likely missing round 1, I think he is a good round 3 target if he happens to come in round 2 and play fairly well, and you can see that he has a good chance of doing that, and he's someone that has a tremendous strike rate. And we spoke about him in the imports video, so go back and check that one out if you want a deeper stats deep dive on Ben Duckett, and he comes in at 152k. So he's going to be fun to watch. With Webster, he's at 164, and he definitely had his big weeks last season. I think he's probably going to end up around the same price again. You know, the year before he was 177. He's 165 this year, and I expect him to have a similar year where he'll get some games with some overs, and he'll have, obviously every other game where he'll bat at 3, and he'll get plenty of opportunities to score runs. It'll just be, can he get opportunities with the ball as well? And at that price, it's very hard to select bat-only guys. So that's where Webster's bowling has to come into play. But we will just look at quickly the team set up just to give us an idea of bowlers in this side. So they'll have the 6 main batters. They'll have Tom Curran at 7, which is going to be really cool. And we'll speak about that. We have the 4 bowlers below that, plus Curran, plus Maxwell, Stoinis and Webster. I forgot to write Webster in there as well. Webster and Stoinis. They're going to make the 8 bowlers. So there's actually a lot. And that's probably where if they wanted to, they could play an extra bat and have Curran at 8, Samamir at 9, and play it that way, and have Campbell Kellaway or something like that in that top 6. And we'll have to see how they play that with potential for guys being out. But overall, it does look like a pretty solid order, and they could roll it out like so and just have lots of different bowling options depending on the situation. And that's where, if you're looking at the bowlers, it's going to be very hard to pick anyone that's not clearly going to get their 4 overs. And I only think there's a couple of guys to do that. And that's where Webster and Maxwell can be a worry. But I do expect Maxwell to bowl sort of that 2 to 3 range per game and be the best captaincy option in round 1. So 247k, I think, yeah, he's clearly the best option. He's cost the most though, and that's kind of the worry. Can you select someone else and be confident captaining them when Maxwell has the ability that he does? That's the big question mark. So that's where he's almost a must-have. He's not 100%, especially if they play the first game, so you can vice captain him or any other star and make that decision from there and go on. Stoinis is likely to bat 5. He's at 84k, so he's definitely one that hasn't scored well the last 3 years and is a throw at the stumps. It's a bit of a hit and miss, a risk. He has the potential. We're batting at 5 and bowling a little bit. It is very difficult to score really well in Big Bash, given it's only 20 overs. As we've seen over the years, you want to be batting 1, 2, or 3, potentially at 4 if your name's Glenn Maxwell. But most people you want in that top 3. Hilton Cartwright, just batting a 6. It's too hard to have a really consistent season. He started so well at the beginning of last year, and then he petered off and went back down to 104k by the end of it, where it's what he averaged at across the year. So I just think batting too low. Tom Curran, on the other hand, he's likely to bat at 7, which is very, very high for a guy that's pretty well guaranteed to be their death bowler, and the guy that's going to bat 4 overs. So Curran, it's really hard to not own him, in my opinion, with 2 doubles in round 1 and round 3. He's cheaper than what he was last year. We've seen his pedigree over the years. Tom Curran is a terrific pick this year, and is someone I will very much likely, a 90-95% chance right now, will have in my side come round 1. And is also a fun vice-captaincy option or something like that as well. He can come out and score some runs, and he's got plenty of wickets in the tank at a nice economy as well. With the Samamir, 124k for him. He bowled well last year in the few games that he was able to play before he had to leave. He was here for the beginning of the tournament and then had to move on. He was good in that sense, but he only had the one game where he had sort of, a couple of wickets and the good economy as well. So him at 124, I think he's the most chance of getting that sort of 3 to 4 overs, along with Tom Curran. Tom Curran first, then Osama, I think. And then the other guys will just be dependent on how well they bowl in that game. So he's also a chance to miss round 1, but if he's not missing that round 1, I think he's going to be a good pick at 124.5k. Mark Steckety, he killed part of my season last year. It was just one of my poor trades, and he obviously started 40k up from where he's at this year. That's the positive. You're getting him extremely cheap, along with Scott Boland at 84.7. But Boland's he's in the Aussie setup. He's likely to still be in there at that time, and it's going to be hard to work out when they decide to let him go and play for the Stars, and when he'll be available for the Stars, and when he'll be available for Australia, and if there's any injuries and the like to the Australian setup. But Steckety, on the other hand, he just bowls really well for red ball stuff, but for the wide ball, for the T20 stuff, he seems to bowl just a nice length at a good pace to hit, and doesn't really have much of a change up. So I think for him, hopefully he's learnt to make those change ups and do some good stuff with that. But if he hasn't, I do think that he's going to be someone that, even at the cheap price, it's going to be hard for him to perform really well unless a few of these guys are out and he becomes, second spearhead with Curran. But it's probably unlikely when they've got, guys like Joel Paris that can come in. You've got Curran, as I said, Webster, Brody Couch. These types of guys can come in and do a job in their bowling stocks. And then Hamish McKenzie, he's the one I have interest in because he bowled really, really well for Perth last year. So he hasn't played too much on the state level, but at 69.4k, that couple of games he bowled for Perth was great. I think he might get the spot, and this is what Maxi Bryden's got in his setup at the moment. So, looking at that, they've got enough pace bowlers. As I said, they've got 8 bowlers, and 5 of them being pace there with Webster, Stoinis, Steckity, Boland, and Curran. That a couple of good spin options will work. And if Osama's out for that first game as well, I think he'll be there definitely. It's probably good to know that if Osama's there, if Hamish gets picked, then he's likely to play a featuring role in the tournament this year, which I think is 69.4k means that you probably slot him in your side with 2 doubles early on, can get those price rises if he happens to do well, and can get some good points on the board. So we mentioned all the guys that are also in the mix, and they can definitely play round 1, but if they're only coming in, I think, as a replacement, it's going to be pretty hard to select them in your side. Harper, we know at 58.5 has 130k pedigree from the year before. He just picked up a 50 odd in the in the white ball stuff in the 50 overs just yesterday, and he could do a job. Other guys could do a job as well in Kellaway. He's a youngster, but will likely be middle order, so you don't want to touch that. Couch, Paris, we've seen them before, and they've been solid. And then Doug Warren, he's the left arm offie, so he's an interesting one. At 39.5k, if he was to get a role in this side, if they wanted to go, instead of 2 leggies, one being lefty, one being righty there, that they pick up a left arm offie just to change things up. But we'll see how that one plays out for the Stars in that scenario. The round 1 potentials, I think, the keeper's going to be needed, so Harper will come in, and does he open? He's very highly owned at the moment in this side, so how does that one play out? That's the big question, with there not being a large allotment of keepers available. There's likely going to be one fast bowler. If Boland isn't available due to test commitments, that I think that could be a potential pick, but which one? And I think it's just a bit of a guess and a bit of a risky play. And then maybe another bowler in general if for some of me isn't available. So it could be a Hamish McKenzie, that kind of play there, I think is the potentials. And I do think the best options there Maxwell at number 1, very likely the captain of most people's sides. Tom Curran, I think, is number 2. Sam Amir, if he's available, I think he's a good selection there. And the reason you're picking these guys is they're a bit more expensive. We know their role. They're more likely to do really good work there. And then one bowler, one of the guys that we mentioned above. And then maybe a batting spot in round 1. If Stoinis, Rogers, or the replacement, whoever comes in and bats, is able to bat fairly high in this order, I think they could do a pretty good job there in this side and in round 1. But that's the question. Do you pick someone just for round 1 if in all of these teams, as we go through them, if they're replacing one of these import guys or one of the guys playing overseas at the beginning of the season? That's probably the question mark. I think you're going to want someone, at least for the first sort of 3 to 4 rounds, with the Stars, given they have 2 doubles. You don't really want to trade someone in for the first double and then have to move them on, or they stay in your team as a non-player from as early as round 3 for someone that's at a decent price. Like if they're 39.5k, like a couple of these guys like Doug Warren and Constance and all these players, then it could probably be okay. But if they're 80, 90, 100k, that type of realm, which most of these guys are, I think it's going to be pretty tough to hold them as a non-player or have to move them on come round 3. So I think with selecting players from Stars, from Renegades, these types of teams that have lots of relevance in the first couple of weeks, then the strikers, these types of teams, which we'll speak about further, then I do think you need them to have a specific role in their team for longer than just the 1 week. Just super simple. Try to keep it really simple without you selecting guys that have a clear role in their side, like a Tom Curran, like a Maxwell, even though there's, we're unsure of how many overs he'll bowl on a game-to-game basis. You know that, if Rogers is named there round 1, he's probably going to be the opener for the year. So that's, a slight benefit. Sam Amir, if he's there from round 1, he's going to be that guy down there. And then the bowlers, I think, will switch. Cartwright's too low. Webster, what role he's going to have, just how with the bat, just how much with the ball. So they're all the question marks you have with the Stars, and they were very poor for us last year. I loaded up on them, and thankfully Webster and Maxwell did well, but I had Harper that didn't do so well. I brought Steckity in, and that was terrible. I brought Tom Rogers in, and he was okay at times. He would get to 20, 21 or 15, and that's why that's locked in my brain. And then he would fail from there, which, just start getting going, and that was the annoying part. So that's the Stars, and we'll move on to, I think the Strikers will go next, and we'll move on from that. So just the early little thoughts around the sides, around the potential 11s that we're going to see. We'll hear more information as it gets closer. We're still a month away, as I said. But across this month, pretty fun. I'm going to be with the inspiration brought on from the NRL Roasty with his hottest 100 in the NRL. I'm going to be doing the hottest 25 in the Big Bash there. So I've just put a short list of 50 together, which I'll start. We'll talk through that video and do that one later today, or bring it out over the next few days. And then I'm going to count down from 25 to 1 for the hottest Big Bash players in thoughts for that NRL Roasties top 100, which I thought was great. So I'm going to give that a go for the Big Bash, and that's going to be on my Instagram page. So make sure you check that out, guys. fantasy.jamie, and also on TikTok as well. So I'll put those links in the description for you guys to have a look at and check out that one, which will be fun, just as something to do each and every day. I'll bring one out for the next guy on that list, and on YouTube I'll do every 5, so 25 down to 21, 20 down to 16, go from there all the way until we announce who the hottest player in the Big Bash is. So something a little fun to do as I'm bored here across the next month, waiting for the Big Bash to start, and then we get into our NRL content as well. So that'll be a little fun one. I hope you guys get around it. Follow it on Instagram, and on TikTok as well. So thanks, guys, for that one, and look forward to getting out the next bunch of teams for you guys.